Hello and welcome to the Womb-Centered Healing Podcast. I'm Salma Morningstar, and I have with me here a guest, Shelley, as a guest speaker for the podcast. Thank you for joining us, Shelley. I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit more and share about what womb-centered healing means to you.
Sure. Thanks for having me on here. It's wonderful. My name's Shelley, and I'm from Pollination Mamas, which primarily started as a postpartum doula service and postpartum care revitalization. So, I have a long story with lots of aspects like most people do, but I'm going to sort of just come up to the present. Most recently, I have a social worker background, and I've woven natural healing methods all through since I was 19, so almost 20 years. And then after my third child, who's now 18 months, during her pregnancy, I started to become extra passionate. I learned and researched about different postpartum cultural practices. I've lived in Asia, and that's where I first learned about it. And then, with my most recent child, I really started to research it a lot more, and I read the first 40 days, and then not long after she was born, the fourth trimester came out, and I was Googling stuff. And then I decided that I just could not go back to working with women as a social worker. I worked in a women's shelter, working primarily with domestic violence, women and children. And I just couldn't go into that role again. I had transformed. I'd had with each of my births, and I would become a new mother. There'd be a new transformation and new immense amounts of creative energy each time, which I'd been observing along the way. And with this transformation, I decided I couldn't go back into that social work. I wanted to work with women and children in a different sort of nurturing way. And rather than just sort of dabble in healing, to really dedicate myself to it fully, plus my role as a mother and partner. So I created Pollination Mamas, postpartum doula service, and I started looking into my own culture and revitalizing what was there, but drawing from other cultures. And I did some training, and I started to weave in my love for herbal medicine and studying that. I'm a student of herbal medicine. And in that, I was talking to women out and about in market stalls. I was providing vaginal steams from herbs that I grow in my garden, and creating this dialogue and this conversation, which started to expand out, as it often does, into women's reproductive health in general. Women were coming to me and saying, can I buy this steam for this, or can I buy it for this? And I was like, well, I think so. Wait a minute. And so then that led to me going to study with the Steamy Chick and become a vaginal steam facilitator. And one thing led to another, and now it's really opened up a new path of wanting to, and doing now, working with women with healing herbs across all sorts of aspects of reproductive health. And in that, when you start to work with reproductive health innately, or any aspect of physical health, innately you start to touch on emotional, spiritual, psychological aspects. Mm-hmm. And so some of the most profound healing experiences that I've had and other people have had with vaginal steaming and hands-on birth trauma healing, self-massage, teaching people about self-massage, that sort of thing, has been the emotional relief and the trauma healing, and the vaginal steaming also, which I'll go into a little bit more when I go into care practices. But what is really becoming apparent as I connect with other women and connect with other practitioners is that this really womb-centered healing is really about embodiment. So we can have the knowledge, and we can learn about different practices, and we can learn about different ways to heal trauma or to thrive and become extremely healthy in our whole being. But we have to come back and keep embodying that. Mm-hmm. And I think in this modern world, that's the big challenge, is coming back to breathe, be still, slow down, be present, really stop to feel what's there, without the distractions, to truly let all the emotions come up. So maybe that is fear, maybe it's contentment, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's sadness, maybe that you feel a bit sensual or sexual. And all of those things are okay. Maybe you're only feeling some of them, maybe one's stronger, but to just really allow those to be present. When you've allowed that flow of energy, then to choose which ones you want to bring in more. Okay, so now I've allowed that fear and anxiety to flow through me. Oh, that contentment was nice. Oh, that sensual energy was nice, that sexual energy. I'm going to, and it might be totally different for anyone, I'm just pulling out some words. I'm going to really now try and embody that and have conscious intention around my womb space where all of those emotions were and where I've allowed them to release from. Now what am I going to cultivate there? Mm-hmm. So then that's part of the embodiment, is really to slow down and see allow what is there, and then to decide what intention you want to bring to that and strengthen. I think that really is key to feminine wisdom or womb-centered healing, is this embodiment.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds to me like what you're talking about too is the element of choice. Yes. Because so often those feelings that you described, whether it's the anxiety or the fear or the anger, are there for good reason, because for some reason, whether it was a traumatic experience, which is usually traumatic because our sense of choice was taken away from us in one way or another. And that's sort of the essence of trauma right there, is that if we are free to choose, we'll usually choose something that's healthy, vitalizing, that honors our wholeness and integrity as a person. And we'll usually choose something that's pleasurable and hopefully nourishing, right? It's only when we've had that right of choice stolen from us, taken from us, or removed, that we're traumatized, and then we can get in these loops of repeating that trauma, and not able to have a clear choice, because, especially if the trauma happens very early in our development, especially if the trauma happens in the womb to our mother when she's pregnant with us, or even at our conception, then that sets a blueprint of trauma that gets repeated over and over again. And that's why I feel womb-centered healing is so important, and these embodied practices of womb-centered healing, like steaming, where it's not just something that you think or talk about, but that it's combined with a physical practice that affects change in your cells and on a cellular level, and bringing in the plant allies. That plants have amazing healing energetics, so that when we're ingesting or bathing ourselves in the essence of these plants, there's a whole ecology. I just had a meditation the other day where I was feeling the molecular geometries of the plant medicines that I'm constantly drinking teas and steaming myself and taking baths and putting on balms. And so I've got, a whole bunch of different, and hanging out in the garden, and, I've got all this. I'm a very plant infused person, and I could feel the energies, the cellular geometries of the plants interacting with my inner ecology. And I swear to you, I had this feeling like some plant was wrapping its leaves around my spine and giving me chiropractic adjustments. I mean, plant medicine can be so powerful. And so I'm really curious to hear about your experience with that, as with plant medicine, and how that comes into the steaming, and that there's a specific relationship between women's wombs and women's health with plant medicine that I feel is very potent. The plants and our wombs, there's something about that. I'd love for you to share what your experience is around that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I also have a background in permaculture and teaching permaculture and working in community development, it always ended up being with women. And so the garden is my happy place. Wherever I am, I try to grow food and herbs. And so in the last few years, I've been more settled. I am somewhere I can stay. I own a place, and I've established a garden and more herbs. So in that, there's been a new development of experience. And yes, it's like this connection that there is a real wisdom when, the pollination mamas. So when you're cross-pollinating, not only with other people, but with other aspects of your world. So, okay, you might be steaming or drinking tea, but you're actually connected with what that plant looks like at different times of the year, how it grows, what its needs are, what its strengths, what its weaknesses are. And people across all cultures have always learnt from plants and everything in the natural world, but especially plants. And so when you spend time, again, it's an embodiment experience. So I might go out and I'll see that the mugwort is just so resilient in the environment that I'm in. It is there just saying, come to me, pick me. I'm beautiful and silver and shiny, but I'm hardy in this Australian environment. I'm here for you. And I'll cut it back, and it just seems to respond so well and just shoot back up and then call out again. It's almost like, and this is just one example, it's almost like I've never read in a book really how to look after mugwort. I've just planted it, and I intuitively just go over and I cut it where I feel like it needs cutting, and it just gets healthier and thrives more and more there. And it's almost like I just know when the time is to cut it again. Mm-hmm. And that's just through experience. That's just through going out there and watching and observing. And the more we do that, the more intelligence and connection we have with our natural environment. So we're not becoming disconnected. We can become disconnected in so many ways. And one major way is the natural environment. But by creating that relationship, we're creating a new sort of language and interaction. There's a really amazing book called Spell of the Sensuous, and it talks about how our languages affect who we are as a being and how we connect with the natural world. And when you let go of that cerebral language and you start to connect with it and read plants or read animals for animal people and read people for people, you start to develop a different sort of language that then becomes embodied. And so for the plant medicine for women and womb-centered healing, there's so many aspects to it, but the medicine is right there for us. So we're often looking outside, or looking to, there's reproductive issues or health issues, looking out to practitioners, which sometimes that's really important. There's definitely a role for going to certain practitioners, whether that be mainstream, alternative, at different times. But they're also empowering yourself to be able to get to know, just even if it's just a few plants, even if you just grow a little bit of mint or whatever grows in your environment, well, a little bit of rosemary, a little bit of mugwort, just to empower yourself that you don't always have to reach outside to help yourself, to heal yourself, that you have an aspect of you that is an innate healer. And by working with plants in that way, that's one easy, simple, beautiful way that you can start to empower yourself to do that. And start listening to other plants that might grow around wild. If you live somewhere, I'm currently in the city at my nan's, but I live in the country, very clean environment, so I wild harvest some of my herbs. I'll look at certain weeds, and I've been looking at weeds, certain plants that grow wild quite easily. And I've been looking at one and just not being able to pull it out. But I actually know a lot of the weeds' names. I have, the ecology and botany background as well in formal and informal studies. And I didn't know this one, but I could not pull it out. I didn't want to pull it out, but I couldn't identify it either. So I didn't know its purpose. And I had this conflict for a year or so. Anyway, finally found out the name of this particular plant. And it just turns out to be horseweed or fleabane, conzoia. I can't remember the Latin name right now. I'll look that up. And it is a known, it's from the Americas. And it has a history of American Indian people using it. It has a strong history of being used in women's reproductive health for a wide variety of things. It's one of those amazing plants. And so as soon as I found that out, I was like, that was my intuition. I knew I didn't want to pull it out. I knew I wanted to use it. And so when you start interacting like that, it's confirming your intuition as well. It's confirming that the plant didn't speak to me with words, but it was speaking to me another way. That is a reality. We've been conditioned to think that's not a reality. But when you talk to people from many cultures and they ask them, how did you learn about the medicinal power or the spiritual power of this plant, they said the plant spoke to them. And I'm starting to understand that. And so even for me, who I have a very scientific part, but I also have a very spiritual part or a creative part of me too. But even for me, still am learning what that is to actually experience. And so, yeah, that's where I think plant medicine can be so powerful to start to engage with.
And I feel like especially for women and womb-centered healing, listening to that intuitive sense and that inner knowing is an important part of that healing process, because a lot of that disconnection from that is a cause of a lot of our womb ailments, because our inner knowing would be guiding us all along about how to be healthy and how to be healthy in our reproductive system. And yet we're taught not to listen to that. We're taught to value only intellectual and logical thinking, whereas that's just this one tiny part of our brain, and the whole rest of our brain, which includes our whole body, we're taught to disconnect from that. And yet that's where all the wisdom about how to be healthy and how to be in this female body, because, you know, the logical brain and all the scientific research has actually been deliberately excluding women from the research and women's bodies from the research until as late as 1990, really, that kind of logical thinking research has deliberately excluded women. And so the knowledge that we have available to us, we need to reconnect with that, which is this inner sense of what feels right, the communication with the plants and the unseen realms that, you know, we're taught, oh, that's just your imagination and that's not valid, right? And yet I was just talking with another guest speaker recently about how, wait a second, that's exactly what is valid. That's how we create our reality, is through our imagination. So I would love for you to share more about the development of this intuitive sense for you. And like, because it sounds like your herbal vaginal steaming practice started out as more of an intuitive approach, that you were just connected with the plants, and you maybe started your own vaginal steaming process for things that were going on for you, and then you said, okay, well, I better get some training because I want to marry these two ways of knowing, right? This inner intuition and what people have been observing, because the evidence is also very supportive to know what seems to happen most often, and what are these plants known for, right? And how is the woman's body known to respond to different types of steaming protocols and like that, right? So combining that collective knowledge with our inner intuition is a really smart approach. So I'd love to hear about your process around that a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, sure. So I came to vaginal steaming in particular by going to a Chinese medicine practitioner maybe 15 years ago when I was having some issues, and it was really helpful. And then I just let that practice go again until I've had this revival in the postpartum care practice, and I was like, oh, women, and I hadn't read it anywhere at that stage, women postpartum should be steaming. Okay, I'll just look into that. All right. Okay, they do. That's all I needed to know. And then I just looked at herbal properties. And like you said, then I took some formal study. So just quickly, I outlined sort of 5 areas that I see for womb-centered healing too. And the vaginal steaming comes under the care practices. So the embodied experience we've spoken about a little bit. And then management of own cycles, and I'll tie this in. Management of own cycles, energy and calendar within the moon cycles. Fertility awareness and the fertility awareness method. Care practices, which is where the steaming and so many other beautiful things come in. And then the healing on all the bodies, so the emotional, spiritual, psychological, physical, and who knows what else. So I've touched a bit on the embodiment. And the care practices, they become that physical way to heal that. And so with the steaming, I then learnt with the steamy chick. And really I started to feel, when I was speaking to women, they were asking me, I started to feel this huge responsibility, but also this huge calling, that sort of aha moment where you go, that's a major part of the reason why I've gone into postpartum care, and is to be speaking to women to realise that all women need this. And it was just like, oh, that's right. I knew this. I discovered it a long time ago and practiced it. And I experimented on myself as I was developing my postpartum care ones, because I didn't actually steam right after my postpartum. I hadn't developed enough knowledge or practice at that point of it. So I felt like I wanted to give myself some postpartum care. So in that was part of my process as well. So then, studying with the steamy chick really opened me up to feel much more confident again in that intuition. So women were coming to me with some minor health issues, some more hormonal phase. They wanted some help with their hormonal phase, whether that be menstruation problems or they were entering menopause. But there was always like that emotional side there too. So the transition to menopause, women would start talking about their emotions around that. Postpartum, becoming a mother. And that responsibility, then I have to really have some good knowledge behind this too. Mm-hmm. So that opened me up to feel quite confident studying with the steamy chick. Confident enough because I worked with Kelly, the steamy chick, also to develop my own herbal formulas, to really sit down and become and experience a lot of the herbs myself. So experiencing I would practice steaming with each herb and drink each herb on its own and connect to that energetically. Then I would put them in combination. Then I would sell them or give them away to people and get their feedback. Okay, all right, I think that one was a bit too strong. All right, I'm going to make that a little bit more gentle, or vice versa. And so when you can marry those two aspects, I mean, Kelly from the steamy chick has brought in a lot of wisdom, a lot of Chinese medicine. There's some Western herbal medicine aspects in there too. And she's actually worked with a lot of women, so she has that experiential data there. And then to be able to share that with people, it almost feels like people are talking about womb wisdom, they're talking about vaginal steaming, yoni steaming at an exponential rate. It's like there has really been an awakening. It's like, it's not just me, what I'm experiencing here, by having this huge responsibility that I need to share this with the world and be practicing it myself. A lot of other women are having this experience too. And then when you start that sharing, and then with women that have used my steams, hearing their beautiful stories too, for physical healing, emotional healing, and it's just reaffirming. It's like, it's so beautiful. It's like we are remembering by doing this one simple practice, and it could be the steaming, or other care practices might be womb and abdominal uterine massage. For some people, vaginal and yoni mapping massage, that's internal, is really healing. Herbal oils, so the bolus, Ayurvedic, herbal compresses, castor oil compresses. Doing yoga according to what moon phase you're in. And there's some amazing people that know a lot more about that. But actually, instead of just practicing yoga the same all through the month, practicing according to each 4 phases or more, then by practicing this, we are reclaiming our feminine wisdom. It's so much more. The healing happens on such a different level just by something so simple. It's so easy, it's so simple, and it's so beautiful, and that's all that's needed, but the effects and the change is so profound. So, yeah, I feel like I'm at an exciting part of the journey to be a part of this collective and just to see where it grows. And I feel really thankful that I've been guided to this point to revitalise this knowledge. And I always knew I would work with herbs. That's why I've always grown them. So, yeah, it's nice to know now why I was planting certain herbs. A lot of the herbs I was already growing for tea or for other uses have ended up being some of the most potent, important herbs for reproductive health too.
Beautiful. So it sounds like what I'm getting from what you're sharing about this, we started out talking about the intuitive qualities and how that comes together with the collected, sort of logical knowledge of evidence that we can observe and articulate more easily than our intuition, right? And bringing those two together strengthens actually the intuition, as opposed to saying that the logical evidence dominates the intuition and like that, right? Instead, it's in partnership, which is what we need to, I feel, return to, is the partnership with the healthy aspects of our masculine qualities, right? The logical thinking, the linear time frame, one thing leads to the other, and the structure that can provide, marrying that in partnership with this intuitive, deep body, somatic knowing that also has this component that I hear you sharing about, of this collective knowing. And that type of that is sort of the glue that brings this partnership together, is this very feminine quality of knowing things together. That as I have an intuition, then I say, hey, to my sister, you want to try this out? It sounds like you've got something going on. Does this help you? And she comes back and says, well, it helped me on this aspect, but this aspect still needs something. Oh, well, let me see what my intuition says. And so together, we're recollecting or remembering, right? Piecing this ancient wisdom back together that has been dismantled in this other system of, well, we don't need to get into what the other system is about, but I think you all know what I'm talking about. So we're remembering this collective valuing of our intuition and partnership between the logical thinking and the intuitive knowing. And so
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's
sort of like helping to also the unseen, so the taboos or the hidden stuff. So that might be, for some people, when we talk about the embodiment, the emotions, sometimes there might be numbness there. They're not feeling anything there. It's being cut off because it was too much, or there was too many other things, too many distractions to be able to connect. So there's marrying those two, the masculine and the feminine aspects, but then also allowing that hidden taboo and the unseen to rise up. And I think when you do get that collaboration, that connection, it often happens on the individual levels first. So you go, oh, my womb needs this, or I need to talk about it like it's separate. The womb and I are experiencing this. But also when people start steaming, they have some trauma release. But when we talk about it together and we start to connect on, like you're saying, oh, I've got this going on, maybe try some steaming. Okay, that doesn't work for you, try this. We're talking about our wombs. We're talking about sexuality. We're talking about our vaginas. We're talking about so many things that just haven't been spoken about much, a little bit. And we're saying, even to the simple fact that, oh, you experienced that after postpartum. So did I. Oh, this happened to your vagina. Oh, I've got hemorrhoids. Really simple stuff. Oh, okay, yeah, I've got this sadness. I've got this emotional confliction that I feel blessed to have my baby. Yeah, I had this birth trauma, small or large. People are talking, and that's a major part of the connection, is we're bringing up that unseen, the taboo that we've been told we don't talk about much. Even so the podcast I just did with Chaitanya, which I spoke about with you, I uploaded to iTunes and it got rejected for explicit content. And really, I think we might have mentioned the word sex once or twice, and vaginas. It wasn't very... But even that, I thought, okay, fair enough. You need to have your regulations in iTunes land. But it just made us laugh that what we were talking about was women's bodies, sexuality, just a vagina, which is like it. We all have them. Most people have ears. All the people that identify as women or were born in a woman's body have vaginas. So, we need to be really also give ourselves credit that this is a new time where these conversations are things that have been suppressed and put in a box, and we can talk about it now. And there's going to be some profound healing collectively for the feminine, just that we have that freedom to do that now.
Well, and it's interesting, the connection between, a lot of womb ailments have to do with holding stuff in, not releasing it through the womb's natural process of releasing, right? Through menstruation, all that. So there's a lot of this, plug it up, don't let it show that that's what's happening. Try to go on with life separate from that, from menstruation. So a lot of that attitude is that plugging up is what is at the root cause of a lot of womb ailments. The same is true for other ailments that we have, not speaking about these things, right? And this, we have two cervixes. This is your cervical spine, and this is your cervix in your womb. And so we have this sister, we have the upper mouth and we have the lower mouth, right? We have the upper throat and the lower. And if you look at a picture of the vocal cords, it looks very much like the vaginal opening. And so this freeing up of our menstrual flow and a new celebration of our menstruality, it seems to be corresponding with this freeing up of our vocal flow, of being able to talk about these things that were forbidden to talk about for so long. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. It's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, because I'm trying to get as many women on here to talk about vaginas.
You have a voice.
And I haven't gotten any censorship so far, and I'm in a whole bunch of other podcast platforms and on YouTube, and no one has rejected any of my material. And so
all I have to do is resubmit that one and tick a box, but still.
Yeah, I don't know. Sounds like I'm glad I didn't go through iTunes to begin with. So, because, it's time for that. What?
Yes, such an important point you make with the mouth and vagina, cervix, vulva connection, because that's a common aspect of birthing easy, is to really let the jaw be relaxed and allow that deep resonance to come through, which will allow, and I think we could use that sound resonance that's taught in sometimes often alternative birth circles all through the month, and especially at menstruation, is to really as you're practicing embodiment and connecting with your body, also check in with your jaw. But that alignment up and down the spine, so you've got your cervix and vaginal entrance, exit and entrance, and then your throat is just that central column through your body, which we know is also the vagus nerve. Mm-hmm. And there's some great research for people that need that to back up with how a lot of these practices do release oxytocin in our body. And oxytocin is so important on many levels for people that don't know much about it. Just in summary, it's an important aspect of birthing well, breastfeeding well, bonding with baby well, bonding with anyone well, close yourself, your partner, your friends. It's the love hormone.
And the pleasure hormone.
Pleasure,
right?
Yes. There's a really interesting book called The Oxytocin Factor by a female scientist called Kirsten Moberg, and she discovered that, like you said, a lot of the research has not been done on women around women's bodies and women's hormones. So she has done a lot and put that into books. And part of what she talks about is the vagus nerve running right through the body, those two cervical openings, and the receptors for oxytocin are somewhat and largely driven and controlled by the vagus nerve, and we have receptors all through our womb for that, and in many other parts of our body, but especially that vagus nerve womb connection, which sends and controls oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
So by activating that and stopping that constriction, which may have come about for all different reasons. But you make a great point also, the constriction of women not allowing their blood to fully come out, and how if residue is allowed to stay in the womb over many months or many years, so many reproductive health issues can come from that. Mm-hmm. And that's where vaginal steaming is wonderful for allowing that and working on cleansing that full release and that full flow, and allowing your womb to really recover if it has been holding on to residue, or even just bringing awareness to, what does my menstrual blood look like? What is it? Do I have brown blood at the beginning and end of my period? How is that changing as I steam? For me, I didn't have any major reproductive issues, but I did have some stagnation, and I have always had a little bit of stagnation. And steaming took my periods from brown blood at the beginning and end, 7 days, really heavy, completely white. I have some iron issues I have to keep an eye on. So steaming took it to 4 days, fresh blood, very little stagnation. If I don't steam, because it's been so hot here, it's 40 degrees, and sometimes I don't feel like sitting on the steam, then straight away the next moon cycle, my next period, I'll see the brown blood again.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It's all in there. The cultures that, one of the things that feels so interesting to me is that there are some cultures that have an unbroken lineage of vaginal steaming as a common practice that all women know about and all women use just as a given for natural health, for women's health and for menstrual health, that is just within the culture. And I know Kelly Garza always tells the story about going for her first steaming experience at a Korean steaming spa, and that the spa office people were kind of laughing at people who weren't Korean, non-Korean women, for not doing this. Like, how could they be so silly? Or
doesn't everyone do it? They do it every month in Korea.
Right.
It's a monthly practice, and if they've got a health ailment going on, then they do it more.
Exactly.
As a maintenance, they just maintain that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, and depending on your lineage, you might be able to access that. And for me, I have mostly like Scottish, Irish, a little bit of British, and a tiny bit of Scandinavian. That it was there, it's just been lost, and it actually wasn't that long ago. So trying to reconnect that, it was practiced across all cultures. In the more now English-speaking countries, it was called fumigation.
Right.
Which, these days the word doesn't sound so great. Maybe it had a different connotation. Right. Before major world wars, maybe fumigation had a different and modern pest fumigation and that sort of thing. Its Latin derivative might have not been as nasty as how we see it. But it was there. And I think, as Kelly has looked into so many different cultures, it was probably everywhere. Whether it was smoking or steaming or both. Smoking was quite common. So that's also part of it, to go, it was everywhere. My ancestors would have practiced this. All women's ancestors would have practiced this on some level.
Yeah. And so that helps to get over the feeling of, what is this weird newfangled thing, that a lot of vaginal steaming practitioners get that from potential clients or from critics, right? Of like, or even doctors, people, potential clients that then go talk to their, doctors, and they get this, you really shouldn't do that. That's ridiculous. There's no, evidence. Well, why is there no evidence? Because the midwives that used to practice this were persecuted, and because the research that's been done has not included gentle, non-invasive practices for women that they can do for themselves for natural healing. The only research well, we won't get into the other kind of research, the invasive, research that just dishonors the female body, and or just excludes the female body altogether from the research. So we're reclaiming these ancient practices. It's not some newfangled fad. We are remembering ancient feminine wisdom with this practice. So I want to thank you for outlining it so well, all the different aspects of womb-centered healing with the self-care practices, the emotional, I don't remember what all 5 of you are.
Yes, embodied experience, management of own cycles, which we haven't gone into a lot, and the care practices, which we've gone into a fair bit, fertility awareness, and healing all bodies. And it seems like no matter at which, and actually Chaitanya said this to me, and it's just so simple, but I love it, path to womb wisdom. Could be any of these. It might be something else. Someone might go, hey, let's add this in. I've got 5 pillars, and based on traditional postpartum care practices for the postpartum care, 5 pillars, and I thought, well, I'm going to come up with 5 for womb wisdom that I will just use as a way to simply introduce people and create a holistic picture of what it could be. And it doesn't matter where you come in, it's just a path to womb wisdom. And often coming in at one point will take you on to the next until you have a beautiful holistic picture. You are collaborating with other people that might have strengths here, might have strengths there. You might develop strengths in all of it over a period of time. You might practice in one area or a couple of areas. But yeah, it really is this beautiful path that you can enter in many different ways.
Well, I like to share about how the womb is really at the center, and all of these different paths leading to womb healing then can open up portals to another exploration until we have this whole picture of, the womb being at the center of our whole health and our whole life. Really, it's where we start out.
Yes, it's where we all started. Right. It's interesting talking about this, sitting here at my nan's, on my mother's side, matrilineal, to think that, the ovum that created me was inside her once, and to really think about what that is.
Right.
So then to touch on those other aspects, so management of own cycles, energy and calendar within moon cycles. So that's about being aware of what the moon phase is, how that affects you and your energy, but also if you're still menstruating, that other aspect for anyone really, but if you're still menstruating, are you bleeding in dark moon? Are you bleeding on full moon? Are you bleeding in between? Then are you ovulating? Because not everyone is ovulating if they're getting a period, and that comes into the fertility awareness, which is another point. Are you ovulating at full moon? Are you ovulating at dark moon, or in between? And so for an example for me, currently and this is from steaming as well, my period went from 32 days down to the 28, 29, completely synced with the moon. I bleed at dark moon, which is perfect for me. And if you have a different cycle, that's fine. Like, everyone is in what is perfect for them. It might shift and change. You might want to try to shift it to suit you in a different way, but wherever you are is perfect. So for me, I bleed at dark moon, which is great because I'm an extroverted introvert. So I really need that time to recoup and replenish myself. I need to go into stillness, into quietness, and not have many people around. And so dark moon is often a more introspective energy where we come inside, we go into our own internal dreaming or stillness. And if I'm bleeding at that time, that's great. I can slow down and still down, because menstruation is like a mini birth. It really needs that safety, that space, which is the care practices help with healthy menstruation. But by honouring your menstruation and creating a safe space also allows you to have a full release. You're not holding on because you feel safe in your environment, just like birth. You're a safe environment.
Right.
Easily. And it's the same with menstruation. Then I ovulate around full moon, which is great because when you're ovulating, your energy is much higher. It's out there in the world. It's the actions of the dreams and plans that you had previously. And ovulation is that energy. Whether you're feeling sexual or fertile, you've got that, the hormonal energy there too, and that energetic energy. So for me, being aware of where the full moon is, but my own cycles, and the management of my own cycles is to honour that. So to actually plan ahead and go, well, my periods are regular enough that I can pretty much guess that's when I'm going to bleed. So I'm not going to plan much then. I'm just going to really open up my diary at that point to not having much. And then I can pack a bit more in around ovulation. And I really can. I need more sleep when I'm bleeding at dark moon. I don't need as much sleep at full moon and ovulation. And by doing that, I have people say, how do you do so much with little children?
Right.
And it might look like I'm doing more than I am, because I do rest and relax a lot too, or in the garden, but I really think it is by planning my world around those natural cycles, riding that wave of full moon ovulation energy, really trying to rest and look after myself. That's a really important aspect and could be talked about for a long time.
I know. We could talk all afternoon about it, or it's morning time for you, I think. But yeah, that brings up some really good points, because that changing of our pacing actually, for me, feels like it works as a momentum builder. Like if we just go at one steady, even keel with no resting or anything like that, then at least for me, there's a place where it just kind of, the energy drops out completely, right? And it's really hard to get it going again. But the wheel just keeps rolling, and it gives that momentum of the energies, rising up with the moon or with our ovulatory cycle, and then going down again and underneath with the menstruation. And I just want to mention that even if you're not menstruating, we all have those cycles within us, and we can connect with the lunar cycle and synchronize all that. But like I said, we could go on, and we do need to wrap up for this interview for now. But I just wanted to thank you for giving such a wonderful overview of all the different aspects of womb-centered healing. I really appreciate that.
One I didn't touch on was fertility awareness, and that's just charting your cycles as an indicator. I do believe you might be interviewing Lisa Hendrickson-Jack, who just released the 5th Vital Sign book, which is I did an early release read on that. It's an amazing book. I've been following her for a while, and I will be interviewing her too. And so, that is a very important aspect, I think, of this. And she is a wealth of knowledge on that fertility awareness of tracking your cycles while menstruating.
It's really important too for feminine fertility empowerment as well, because but again, this is a whole other topic that we could do a whole nother podcast on.
She can do the podcast.
So if people want to talk with you more and connect with you about your work, where can people find you?
Yes, so I have a website. It's pollinationmamas.com. Head on over, have a look. I've got a blog which is not as active, but there's still some blog posts in there. The podcast tab is up, and there'll be, so people can listen to my podcast there. They can look at what services I offer. I've got all the herbs there that I sell for vaginal steaming, some herbal teas. For the steaming herbs, I've got an outline of got 4 different blends and an outline of how they can help people for different issues or for maintaining their own individual body. Then I've got Instagram at Pollination Mamas and Facebook at Pollination Mamas. And please I'm always open to just questions, discussion. I usually jump on the internet actively through my business all through the week in business hours, Australian time. So I will get back to you if it takes a day or two. Jump on and have a look and come and collaborate with me. If you're a practitioner, I'd love for you to come on over and say hi on Instagram, and I can support your sharings, and we support each other. So that would be wonderful.
Beautiful. Thank you. And the same, I can also say the same about my work. As if you're listening to this, you may be aware of the Womb-Centered Healing Temple, which is an online space that this podcast is a part of, where we're gathering womb-centered healing practitioners to collaborate and offer our online products and services in a collaborative way and create enriching events and collaborative offerings together. So I invite you to check it out. I'm gonna be launching the membership site soon that will afford members access to all of the products and services in the temple, and pre-access to various events like the summits and things like that, and ongoing access to temporary events as well. So come on over to wombcenteredhealing.com as well and check out what's available there. It's such an exciting time to be a woman and to be in service to our feminine remembering. So would love to hold a vision with you all today for this overflowing, joy-filled bowl of delight and love and passion for this time of remembering our power as women and re-embodying that power together and lifting each other up and having a lovely splash around in this bowl of delicious feminine empowerment. So thank you so much for joining me today, Shelley. And that's all for now. Until next time.
Thank you. Go give your womb some love, ladies, women.
There we go. Good.
Anyway,
Good advice.
you can.
There
Thank
we
you.
go. Mm-hmm.